That is why we have a great high priest who has gone to heaven, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us cling to him and never stop trusting him. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all of the same temptations we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God.
What up, Crossing Church? So glad to have each and every single one of you here today, joining from all of our different locations. Fantastic to have you. To those of you watching online, inside, a special shout out to those of you who are part of the Inside in Jacksonville. Got a report from our Inside pastor, Bill Twaddell. And check this out, there were 11 baptisms yesterday at the Crossing Inside at our newest Inside location in Jacksonville. We're praising God for that. To those of you joining for the very first time in whatever format or whatever location you're viewing from, we are so thankful that you're here. And here at the Crossing, we have a simple belief. We believe that anybody and everybody can have an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you want it, it's available today. But I have a message that will hopefully be an encouragement to you and help you start that journey. On October 12th of this year, Eliud Kipchoge became the first person to complete a marathon in just under 2 hours. He completed the 26.2 mile feat in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds, requiring a blistering pace of 4 minutes and 34 seconds per mile on average, which means he was running at 13 miles an hour. Have you ever met runners? Have you seen them? Aren't they the worst? Just really horrible people. They say things like they love to run, or if I don't run, I just don't feel right. And I'm like, every time I do run, I don't feel right. My brother's that way. He runs 5Ks, 10Ks, even half marathons. I actually believe that one time my brother accidentally ran a half marathon. Like he did the 10K thing and then just didn't really realize that he could stop and just saw everybody else kind of running. And so he just kept running, which is something that has never happened with me. He's one of those freak runners. He'll be over at the house and he'll be like, I'm gonna go for a run. And then he'll come back like an hour and a half later. And I'm like, what happened? Where'd you go? I don't know, I just ran till I got tired. And then I turned around and started heading home. Never happens for me. I run in tight circles. So that way at any moment in time I need to stop, I'm not far from where I started, right? I'm just gonna run around this tree until I'm done, okay? So, not too long ago, my brother came down to Quincy to run an event they have here called Bridge the Gap. And he ran the 10K in 36 minutes and 36 seconds at a pace of 5 minutes and 55 seconds a mile for 6.2 miles and finished first overall. He's a psychopath. Yeah. What a lot of people don't know is I like to run too. A lot of people misjudge this about me, but I love to run. From time to time, I run to Dairy Queen. From time to time, I run to McDonald's. Sometimes I get a whole group of people together and I'm like, hey, do you all want to run to Taco Bell with me? I'm big into running. But on a serious note, in 2004, someone asked me if I would run a 5K. And they said they'd pay my registration. It was actually here in Quincy. It was Bridge the Gap, 2004. They brought over a little workout plan for what I would need to do to run a 5K. I have no concept then at what a 5K even meant because I'm an American. And so I just said, sure. And they gave me this little routine and I went out one day and I ran to the end of the block, felt pretty good. And was like, I think I'll be fine. Race day shows up, and I did a couple things that were smart that you guys will understand. One, I bought myself a good pair of tights because that seems to be one of runners' favorite accessories. good pair of tights. Also, to help you understand what was happening, it was a cold day, so I did the layer thing, which runners are big into layers, love a good layer. And then I had in my possession a compact disc player with ESP protection and the little hand strap so that way I could jog to the rhythms. And I show up for the race. I looked around. There were people older than me. There were people heavier than me. There was nobody as big as me, though. Nobody like my size. And I noticed that stretching seemed to be important to the people that were there. So I looked for a place to stretch. There seemed to be some heat coming out of a tent that they had. And I was like, that's probably where I want to go, where it's warm, to get the muscles warmed up for the race. So I go in there, come to find out that's not where you stretch, but it's where they are serving donuts. And for those of you who aren't a runner like me, carbo loading is so important. And so I didn't spend as much time stretching as I did eating the donuts that they had there, which I thought was a smart idea on their part. Right before the race, they line us all up. This is, by the way, the first and only official race I've ever been in my life. So fortunately, they took a picture. If you pull up the picture, you see a bunch of people about this tall who've joined the race, and then you just see me, just standing head and shoulders above everybody else. They take the picture, and then the gun goes off, and everybody starts running. And right from the beginning, a lot of the more serious runners were intimidated by me. And so I made an agreement with them early on that I would not win the race and therefore hurt their self-esteem. I was doing pretty good, but the race starts right out at the right next to the river. And then it takes a hard left and it goes straight up Mount Everest. And maybe 2 or 3 steps up that hill, I began to lose my religion. Now, once you get up to the top, you go over the bridge. And I don't know if you've noticed this before because you're probably doing what I do, which is driving. Bridges are not level. They do this. And so you run up the huge hill to get to the bridge, and then you just keep running up a hill. Then you run down a hill, which sounds great, except for psychologically, you know that every time you run down a hill, there's another hill you have to run up. My body starts rebelling. Have you ever been running and then there's this side pain right here? It's as if one of your ribs says, yeah, man, this is too much, I'm out. And it tries to escape Alcatraz, it just leaves the body and starts boring a hole in the back. Then you get to that point where like your lungs start taking turns as which one's gonna operate. Like, listen, man, you take it for a little while, then I'll take it for a little while. You can't see straight, you're not real happy with your life, you're on a bridge, you don't wanna run anymore. There's only really one option, which is to jump, and you don't feel like that's the right move yet, but you're not ruling it out. Things are not going well for me. My knees are saying stuff, my legs are saying stuff. In fact, there are parts of my body that I didn't know exist that have revealed themselves to me. And I walk for a while, and then I run for a while, and then I walk for a longer while. And I'm still feeling pretty good about me being in the race. And we're closing in on the end, and I hear a noise. It's not a noise that I'm used to hearing in races, but then again, this is my first race. The noise keeps getting closer and closer, and then eventually the noise passes me, and it is an individual in an electric wheelchair. And 2 things happened to me. 1, I have never been so jealous in my life, because if I ever run another 5K, I too would like an electric wheelchair. The second thing is, and I mean, this is me, it might not be you, I don't know how comfortable I am being beat by a person in a wheelchair in a foot race. I'm not okay with it. I feel like that's not who I want to be. And then you have to ask yourself this question: am I the kind of guy who would race a person in a wheelchair? Yeah, stuff I wasn't planning on navigating that day. Well, about that time, the Lord revealed to me that the finish line was about 300 yards ahead. And so I made a decision. I was going to race. So I had a quick pep talk with the legs, the lungs, the wrists. I don't know why my wrists were hurting so bad, but they weren't feeling good. And I go, listen up, guys. We got about that far to go. Don't know really how far that is. My vision's pretty blurry. But we don't want to be a part of a body that lost to a person in a wheelchair. So here's the deal. I'm going to ask for everything you've got, and then after this, we're going to go get more donuts, and I'm going to let you sleep for the rest of the day. My body said 10-4. So we started, I don't want to use the word running, but moving faster. And all of a sudden, the person in the wheelchair, they started hearing things that they've never heard in a foot race before. Something like a cross between a wildebeest and a locomotive trying to make its way to heaven. And I'm gaining ground. In fact, I eventually catch up side by side with this incredible person. They were a Jesus follower, by the way. They had Philippians 4:13 on the back of the chair, which they could do anything through Christ who strengthens them, which I was like, that's way cool. And electricity, if we're gonna be honest, okay? He's not helping me as much as he's helping you right now. Well, I eventually, right at the end, I win. I won the race. And I didn't lose to that person. You need to know this. I completed the race. Let's not say ran. I completed the race in 33 minutes and 42 seconds, which is a blistering pace of 10 minutes and 50 seconds per mile. You could barely see me. I was going so fast. That means I ran this thing at 5.5 miles an hour. You walk at 4. In other words, when God made me, He didn't make me a runner. He didn't make me a racer. That's just not who I am. And so I get frustrated from time to time when I read in the Bible that the authors start talking about running races. They lose me. It frustrates me a little bit because, when my brother reads stuff about that, he's like, oh yeah. But when I read it, I'm like, oh no. Because I don't like running races. Look what happens here in Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. This passage comes right after what we learned last week. For those of you who weren't able to be here last week, you can catch it on YouTube or on our website because it'll help form the foundation of what we're talking about here today. But in Hebrews chapter 11, it talks about all of these heroes of the faith. People who have lived in the Old Testament, who lived out their faith, believed in God, and trusting that their hope in Him was not in vain. He says, in view of all of these people who've gone before you, listen to me, if they can do it, you can do it. Looking to them as our example, our job is to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Why? Well, because we have a race to run. But there's something interesting that happens in the Greek here. And actually, if they were to translate it correctly, it would say, having thrown off. I never caught that before. The writer in Hebrews says, throw off everything that hinders, but it's actually having thrown off. This was something that was supposed to happen to us in the past. Maybe that's why so many of us have such a hard time running the race that's been marked out for us. We never actually got around to throwing off the weight. I wonder if there's people listening to me right now that are in that predicament right now. You're trying to run a race for Jesus Christ, but you've never actually thrown off the weight. When you drive home on a Sunday, you'll see a bunch of people out running, at least I do. Have you noticed that there's never a runner in cargo pants? Never, not once. I've never seen a runner with a backpack. They love the very short shorts. I mean, we don't want to carry any extra material when we're going for a run. They have the short shorts, they have the tights, and then they have they're so convinced that like weight matters, they don't even give themselves a whole hat. Have you noticed? They just do those bands that keep the forehead and ears warm. They keep the whole top just totally exposed because runners don't want to carry any extra weight. And so we're supposed to throw off two things. One, the sin that entangles. I wonder how many of you at all of our locations are listening to my voice right now. There's a sin that you've been wrestling with, that you've been coping with, that you've been negotiating with. Here's my question to you. What if today was the last day you dealt with it? What if today you actually threw it off? It's been years that you've been navigating this sin, decades. In fact, you can't remember your life without that sin being a part of it. It frustrates you, it hurts you, it alienates you, it's destructive to you. And so you've just figured out all kinds of different ways to navigate it. It's like when you go to the airport, you see those people just with all of their bags. And when I first started, I just have like one bag. And then you go from like a backpack to you get like the expedition backpack with like the little waist clips, so that way you can support it on your hips. Because you know what? Instead of me getting rid of some of my baggage, I'm just gonna learn how to carry it more efficiently. And then when that's not enough, you get the carry-on bag, and you get the carry-on bag with the wheels that you can just drag behind you. But then, you know what? You upgrade and you get the one that has 4 wheels that can go in any direction so you can just push it. And what we end up doing is we end up accumulating all kinds of ways to carry our baggage, carry our weight. And if you walk in the airport, have you seen that person trying to run with all of their things? It's impossible. And here you and I are navigating all of our sin instead of actually just letting it go and no longer letting it be a part of our lives. So we're supposed to throw it off. Not just the sin that entangles, but also anything that hinders us. Well, what are the things that hinder you? This is not necessarily a sin. I need you to hear me on this. The things that hinder you might not actually be a sin, but it could very well be the effects of a sin. Maybe it's not the sin itself, but it's the shame associated with that sin. Maybe it's the guilt that you still carry with you. Even though you've let go of the sin and that sin's no longer a part of your life, there's a piece of it that's still with you today. This past week, I was talking to somebody and I was asking the question, tell me what you remember about your marriage. And she replied, which one? And I said, well, how many times you been married? And she said, 4. And she goes, I don't ever want anybody to know that because I'm embarrassed. I told that story on Thursday, and before I could walk out of our 48th Street campus, I had a lady come up to me in tears and say, that part of your sermon was for me because that's who I am too. People who, they've left their sinful life behind them, but they're still carrying the weight and the baggage and the pain and the guilt of that sin. It's still hindering them. It's keeping them from their maximum potential in Christ. He says, we got to get rid of all of this stuff because we're in a race, and a very specific kind of race. He says this is a race of perseverance. In other words, this is no sprint. This is not going to be easy. This race is going to be long and painful and challenging. It's going to test our will and our commitment. You see, perseverance is a theme in these first 3 verses. In fact, the word shows up 3 times. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. But after you have thrown off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, the next thing we're told to do, can be found in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Here is a truism that you can take home. Like if you want this sermon in a sentence, like in the easy takeaway bag way, here it is. Wherever you fix your focus, your feet are gonna follow. Wherever you fix your focus, your feet will follow. Now, let me prove it to you. There's some of you right now, you are living and operating in a bad environment. You don't like the environment that you're in. You don't like how it makes you feel. You don't like what's happening there. And sometimes you go, how did I get here? There's some of you right now listening, you spend times doing an activity. Maybe it's visiting a website or an app that you know you shouldn't. In fact, every time you visit it, you feel a little worse. There's guilt that you have with it, shame that you have with it, and you spend time there. And you're like, how did this happen to me? How did I get to this place? There's some of you listening to me and you're in a bad relationship. Everybody's told you you're in a bad relationship. Your friends have talked to you, your family's talked to you, and the person you're with is not the kind of person that you want to be dating, but you just keep dating. And you know that this person's harmful to you and the direction God has in your life. And you know it too. Deep down inside that this is not what you want either. And then you ask yourself, how did I get here? It's because you fixed your focus there. Eventually, you can be running your race in a certain direction and you can look from side to side and you'll be okay, as long as you keep focusing your head forward. But listen, if you're trying to run this way and you keep your focus over here, eventually your body's just gonna start following your face. Wherever you fix your focus, your feet will follow. And as Christians, we focus our attention on something else. We focus our attention on Jesus. As Christians, we want to be where He is. We want to do the things that He wants for us. So we fix our focus on Him. Some of you, when you're running your race for Christ, you can't be looking at your feet all the time because you're not going to be able to see what's ahead. You can't be spending all your time looking over here and looking over here. You got to go, where do I want to be? And for a Christian, we just want to be with Jesus. And so we fix our focus on Him. What are all the different areas and all the different ways that you are fixing your focus right now? Just ask yourself this question in your heart right now. Is my focus on Him? Am I following after Him? Well, why do we fix our focus on Him? The Bible says because He is the pioneer and perfecter. He's the author and completer of our faith. He knows all of the ins and outs of faith. He designed faith. He created faith. It is all found in Him. All I need to know and all I need to understand is found in the experience of an intimate personal relationship with Jesus. All I need to know about faith is found in the person of Jesus Christ. When I begin and live out an intimate personal relationship with Jesus, I have every resource I need to live out my calling, my purpose, and my faith. All of it. I have everything I need. Then look what happens in Hebrews chapter 12. For the joy set before Him, He endured, there's that word again, the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We're gonna get an inside look into the race that Jesus ran for you and me. It was Jesus's joy to endure the cross. He scorned its shame. The choice of words here is really interesting. In effect, what he's saying is that the cross was the lowest form of capital punishment in the Roman world. It was reserved for slaves and criminals, and it involved both torture and public humiliation. But on the cross, Jesus was treated as being valueless. He was mocked and ridiculed. In short, while Jesus was on the cross, He was being scorned. He was being shamed. So then when the author says scorning its shame, What he's saying is Jesus was turning it in on itself. He was saying that Jesus scorned the scorn. Jesus was able to endure the pain of the cross for the joy that was set before him, which was on the other side of that cross. All of the stuff that he was dealing with would be viewed as insignificant compared to the joy set before him of being exalted to the right hand of God. He's serving as an example for you and me. If you were here last week, you'll remember that we were talking about faith and how you have faith and that if you can trust God anywhere, you can trust him everywhere. And then we talked about what it means to have faith, and one of them is that you have to believe that God exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So Jesus, by faith, endured the cross for the joy set before him, because on the other side of the cross was your freedom. On the other side of the cross was him being exalted to the right hand of the Father. He believed that God rewarded him and that he would claim that as his own. So as Christians, we look beyond our present circumstances. We look beyond our present difficulties to the joy that will be ours, to the promised rewards of God. But you might be going, but Clayton, this race is so hard. I face so much opposition. It goes on in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. There's that word again, endured. In the Greek, the word is hupomeno. It means to remain under. When the load is heavy, you remain under it and you carry it. When the battle's furious, you remain under and you stand your ground. When persecution is fierce, you remain under and you hold on. This verb is used over 17 times in the New Testament. And each time it gives us a picture into what it means to remain, what it means to endure. In Mark chapter 13, it says, he who stands firm to the end will be saved. He who endures will be saved. 2 Timothy says, if we endure, we shall also reign with him. In Hebrews chapter 10, it says, you stood your ground in the great contest, in the face of suffering. You endured in the midst of hardship. James chapter 1 says, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive a crown of life. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we hear love always perseveres. In other words, it never fails. Love endures. And so you and I, we look to Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the Father. There is no one that you know that has experienced greater opposition, greater pain, and greater suffering than Jesus. But hear me, he is our example for us in our pain, in our opposition, and in our suffering. You can endure. The only time the word endure shows up is if there is pain to be experienced. You don't have to endure wonderful things. You have to endure hard things. And the Christian life, hear me, is not an easy one. It's a hard one. It's like complaining after you jump off the diving board that you got wet. That's what happens. When you decide to start an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it will be hard. But hear me, it will be worth it. He will be with you. And as we turn more and more of our lives over to him, we will experience greater and greater rewards. There's some of you who are listening to me right now. I appreciate that. There's some of you that are listening to me right now. I need you to hear this. I got 4 takeaways for you. 1, if you're not in the race, get in. Listen, there's only 2 kinds of people in the world. And I'm saying this because I love you. There's people who are running from God or people who are running to him. There's no middle ground. There's no treadmills in this life. You're either running towards him or away from him. There's some of you, you've been out of church for a while and you've seen everybody else start an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. But listen, today could be your day where you start the race, where you get your bib number, where you line up and you start running. And I need you to know, if you start running at this church, you won't run alone. We'll be with you. We'll help you. You do not have to do this thing by yourself, but listen, you better start that race because you can't reap the reward unless you finish the race. That's what Paul says. He says, I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I have fought the good fight. And there is a crown of righteousness in store for me. There is no prize if you do not run and you do not complete it. And if you want heaven, if you want the hope of heaven to be yours, you want the forgiveness of sins to be yours, it starts after you begin an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. There's some of you listening to me right now, if you were to be honest, you started to run your race, but you've never really shed the weight. You've never really let go of the things that entangle you and the things that hinder you. But maybe today could be that day. Maybe today could be a holy moment for you, and you finally leave some of the things that you've been carrying. You leave them behind. You leave them here. You have no idea what freedom feels like because you've never really accepted it. You've never actually walked in it, but you could walk in it today. There's some of you listening to my voice. If you're to be honest, you need to fix your focus. You've been looking at your circumstances. You've been looking at 1,000 things, but it's been a long time since you've looked to him. Look at him. Follow him. He's the author and perfecter of your faith. Everything you're gonna need can be found in him. And lastly, there's some of you, if you were to be honest, life's been hard. Whether it's been financial, whether it's been relational, whether it's been occupational, whether it's been something that's happened medical, life's been hard to you. And when you started this Christian life, you had no idea how hard it was gonna be. Some of you, you're starting to feel the weight and the pressure as you start thinking through all the holidays that you're gonna be walking through, people that you're gonna see and interact with. Some of you, you're getting diagnoses that just feel crippling. Hear me. Don't give up. Endure. Hold on. Don't let go because it will be worth it. You do not run alone. You run with him. And there is a reward on the other side of your pain. We're moving to a time of decision. What up, YouTube family? Hope you guys enjoyed this week's message. I'm gonna encourage you guys to do 4 things today. 1, would you hit that like button and let us know that the content that we're producing is being a benefit to you and to your family? Second thing I'm gonna encourage you to do is hit that subscribe button so that we can start to coalesce and go on this journey together. The third thing I'm gonna encourage you to do is hit that bell button. That bell's gonna turn on your notifications, so every time we upload content, you'll be notified so you can join in with us as soon as possible. And then the last thing is, if you feel like you've been blessed to be a blessing and you don't give to another church, we would love to give you an opportunity to be generous with us as we try to be generous towards God. You can go into the description below and you can click that link for the Give app, and it will walk you through everything you need to do to make that a reality. We appreciate you, we love you, and God bless you.